The restaurant gleamed with chandeliers and chatter silver cutlery clinking softly against fine china, as waiters moved like clockwork between tables. She worked quietly among them, her uniform neat, her hair tied back, her steps practiced and light. No one noticed her much. She was just another waitress in a sea of polished faces. But when she brought the tray into the private dining room upstairs, everything changed. The billionaire sat there, surrounded by business partners, their laughter deep, confident and loud. His walls were lined with paintings and photographs framed in gold and marble, stories of success and power captured forever. She set the tray down carefully, but as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A black and white photo hanging behind his desk. It was faint under the light but familiar. A man in worn overalls, smiling, holding a wrench in his hand, standing beside an old factory gate. Her breath caught. She stepped closer, unable to stop herself. Her voice barely, a whisper. "Sir, why is my father in your office portrait?" The billionaire's laughter died instantly. His hand froze halfway to his glass. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as if he hadn't heard her right. "What did you just say?" She pointed again, her hand shaking. "That's him. That's my father. He worked in a factory just like that one. The same scar on his hand. I know that face anywhere." The billionaire stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. He went pale, the color draining from his face as though the air itself had left the room. His business partners glanced at each other, confused, one of them asking softly, "Who is he?" The billionaire's voice cracked, low and unsteady. "That man was my mentor 30 years ago. But he died in an accident that wasn't supposed to happen." The waitress's heart pounded louder than the rain against the windows. She whispered, "What do you mean, wasn't supposed to happen?" The billionaire's hand trembled as he set his glass down, his eyes locked on the portrait like it had just come alive. The room had gone silent. No laughter, no whispers, only the sound of her uneven breath. He took a step closer to the wall, his voice low as if speaking to himself. "That man saved my life." She blinked, confused. "What are you talking about, sir?" "My father worked in a metal plant before he died." The billionaire nodded slowly, the memory flashing across his face. "I know I was there." Her heart dropped. The air seemed to thicken. "What do you mean you were there?" He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. 30 years ago, I was a junior engineer in that factory. The day of the explosion, your father pushed me out of the way. He took the full force of it instead." He paused, his gaze distant. "I woke up in the hospital. They told me he didn't make it. I built everything I have trying to honor him, but I never found his family. I didn't even know he had a daughter." Her throat tightened, her eyes filling with tears. "You never looked for." Her voice trembled with disbelief. He closed his eyes. "I tried. The factory burned to the ground and all the records were gone. They told me he was alone. I believed them, and I shouldn't have." She stepped closer now, anger and grief twisting inside. "You hung his face on your wall like a trophy, but you never thought maybe someone missed him." He looked down, ashamed. "You're right. I owed him my life, and I didn't even try to repay it. I just built a fortune on top of his sacrifice." For a long moment neither spoke. Just two lives tied by one moment of loss he'd tried to forget and she could never escape. Finally she whispered, "He died saving you, and we died. Trying to survive without him." His voice broke, then barely a whisper. "I can never fix what I let happen, but I can start now if you'll let me." He sank into his chair as if the weight of 30 years had finally found him, his shoulders slumped, his face pale. She stood across from him, trembling, torn between rage and disbelief. He looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time in full honesty. "There's something else you need to know," he said quietly. "The explosion wasn't an accident." The room seemed to shrink around them. "What do you mean?" she whispered. He took a shaky breath. "The company had been cutting corners using unsafe materials to save money. Your father discovered it. He tried to warn management, but they silenced him. They told him to keep quiet, or lose his job. That day he confronted them in the control room. I was there. I heard them argue. He told them if they didn't fix it, he'd go public. Minutes later, the system blew. She stared at him, the world spinning, her heart aching in her chest. So he was punished for doing the right thing. He nodded, tears gathering in his eyes. He died trying to save everyone, and they buried the truth to protect the company's name. Her voice cracked. And you did nothing. His head dropped. I was young, scared. I didn't have power then. And when I finally did, I couldn't face what I'd done. I bought the factory, rebuilt it, and told myself hanging his picture was enough. But it wasn't, not even close. She pressed her hand against her mouth as silent tears fell. He rose slowly, walking to the wall, and took the portrait down, his voice breaking as he spoke. I can't change what happened, but I can give him what they took away. His name, his story, his honor. He turned to her, holding the frame out. This doesn't belong here anymore. It belongs to you. She hesitated, then reached for it, her fingers brushing his, the moment thick with grief and something almost like forgiveness. I grew up thinking my father died for nothing, she said softly. I didn't know someone remembered. He whispered. I never forgot. I just didn't have the courage to say it. A week later, the billionaire stood before a crowded auditorium, flashes from cameras lighting the stage as reporters whispered among themselves. Behind him hung a new portrait framed in gold, but this time, not in his office. On the wall of the rebuilt factory, now turned into a foundation bearing her father's name. The waitress stood off to the side, clutching a folded handkerchief, her heart racing as the man who once sat behind glass walls spoke with trembling conviction. 30 years ago, a man gave his life to save mine. His name was Thomas Reed. He wasn't just a worker, he was a hero. And today his name will finally take the place it always deserved at the front of this company. He paused, his eyes glistening. As he continued, I built my empire out of guilt, trying to repay a debt I could never repay. But I realize now the best way to honor him is not with money or buildings, but with truth. His voice broke as he gestured toward her, and his daughter reminded me of that truth. She reminded me that silence is the loudest form of betrayal. The room filled with applause rising like thunder. The billionaire turned toward her, tears sliding down his face. I can't undo what I did, he said quietly, but I can make sure the world never forgets the man who taught me what integrity means. She stepped forward, holding her father's old photograph, now restored and clear. She placed it beside the new plaque that read, the Thomas Reed Memorial Foundation. Built on courage, not greed. Her eyes shimmered as she looked up at the portrait and whispered, Dad, they finally see you. The billionaire stood beside her, humbled, his voice soft. I hope this brings you peace. She turned to him and nodded. Maybe not peace, but justice. Nodded once, his voice low but sure. Justice is where healing begins. As the applause filled the hall, she looked up at her father's smiling face, and for the first time the ache in her chest felt lighter, as if he was standing right there beside her, proud of the woman she'd become. If this story moved you, share it, so others never forget that one selfless act can rewrite a destiny in ways no one sees coming.